I turned 70 last week, and that is a big breakthrough, I guess. When I was 20, we were all dedicated to being radical, rebellious generation that was going to turn the world upside down, and that meant to reject traditional things like marriage and having babies. But today, at 70, I realized that if I was 20 today, and I wanted to be radical and rebellious and turn the world upside down, so to speak, live a countercultural life, it would actually mean embracing things like getting married in your 20s rather than your 30s, and having 3, 4, 5, 6, even 7 children if you want to. That would be radical and rebellious. So today I want to look at some of the ways that we're living today and what it means for us to live a life where we're radical and rebellious in the sense of doing God's will for our life. Treating children as children and not as dogs, and treating dogs as children is what we're going to look at. Thank you for joining us today. I want to talk about something that's got me both depressed and excited at the same time. We live in a time when we've got people treating babies as dogs and dogs as babies, and that is not a good thing. I'm alone today. Mark will be joining us again next week as he gets back from his vacation. But I really want to talk about this contrast that we are seeing today in how people are treating their pets, and they're really, in a way, treating them as their babies that they don't have. I was put on to this by some reading about the lack of birth rates all over the world. And I was reminded of a novel that was written back in 1992 by P.D. James. She wrote a novel called The Children of Men. And in this dystopian kind of setting, she imagines living in the United Kingdom in 1995 when the last naturally born baby is born, and from that point on, there is a mass infertility crisis, and no one can have a baby by natural means anymore, and all artificial means are no good anymore. So they're all living in the last generation of human existence at that point. And in the story, there's this remarkable moment in which P.D. James describes how people developed a knack for dressing up their puppies and kittens in children's clothes and walking them through the streets and parks in strollers. That was an indication to P.D. James that people have a natural instinct to reproduce and to care for something other than themselves. And this is how she was expressing it in her novel. I think that is very true, and I think those forces are evident even in our world today as we reject having children through abortion. One of the signs of the times in which we live is this headline from Newsweek that is declaring that for the first time ever in South Korea, they sold more pet strollers than they sold baby strollers. Can you imagine such a thing? I honestly didn't know what a pet stroller was, so I had to look them up on the internet, and here's a couple of pictures of pet strollers. And maybe if I was out more, I would see more of them in parks and stuff. But they're very becoming very common, especially in places in the world where having children has really been rejected. Right now, South Korea has one of the lowest birth rates in all of the world. You need a birth rate of 2.1 to have a stable population. They're down to 0.72, which means their whole economy is going to be collapsing over the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Half their population will die out. They'll be half their size in another 50 years. Same way with many other parts of the world. We grew up with the delusion. My generation grew up with the delusion there was a population problem. We have too many people in the world. And that was a delusion And now today, young people are living under their own delusions. Proverbs chapter, where is it here? I got it. Proverbs 14:12 says, "There's a way that seems right to a man, but in the end, it leads to death." Every generation has its delusions about what is life-giving and fulfilling, but they are empty wells. They're broken cisterns, as the Bible says. They lead to nothing. They lead to vanity and emptiness and brokenness in the end. And I think that one of the signs of the current delusions for Gen Zers is that they now treat pets, dogs, as babies, and they treat babies as dogs. And that is a sad, harsh reality. So what can we learn from some of these observations that are going on? Number one, I think that we can look at what the Bible says is the truth, not the delusion. And the truth is that God has designed human life to be fulfilled in pouring themselves out into the life of others. Self-seeking people are empty people. People who pour themselves out into others find that they are filled up in the process. That's the way God has designed us. And when it comes to marriage and family, then, we read in the Bible, for example, in Genesis 1:28, "And God blessed them and said, 'Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it.'" God blessed them, meaning God create a way for them to be happy. That's the essential idea behind the word blessed, is that there's a happiness. It's not a superficial happiness like your birthday party, okay? It's a deeper happiness. It's more pointing toward joy, or a lasting sense of joy and fulfillment in life. And what the Bible is saying here is that God has designed life to be fulfilling through the basic things of marriage and having children, in addition to the labor that we produce. Every generation twists and turns these basic ideas into delusions that lead to death and emptiness in the end. But that is the idea behind it. So Genesis 1:28 is showing us the path that leads to ultimate and lasting fulfillment, and breaks the lie of whatever delusions we're living under in each generation. Besides treating our pets as children, and that delusion, we also are living in a time in which we treat babies as animals that can be disposed of the way animals can be. And that is the reality behind abortion. Abortion basically denies the humanity of the child and treats it as something that you can discard, the way you can cut your hair or your fingernails. And that is the reality of abortion. But here's the other reality about abortion, and that is that human nature won't allow us to reduce abortion to something that is equivalent to cutting our hair or getting our fingernails cut. In other words, our whole body registers a reaction against it, even though that's what we do. So if not having children means that we find other ways to express that, like treating our dogs as babies, our bodies react the other way too when we treat babies as dogs. And all of the science and research on the mental health that follows abortion suggests that the Bible suggests that we're not able to treat and get away with it, treat our babies as animals that can be disposed of. Here's some of the indications of what happens when you have an abortion among the couples that are involved. They have a much higher risk for things like anxiety disorders, depression, alcohol use and abuse, marijuana use and abuse, and suicide behaviors. In fact, when you put all the studies together, the risk factors are quite alarming. you're at a 34% higher risk of suffering all kinds of anxiety disorders. When you talk to couples who have aborted, they themselves describe how their mental health, even their physical health, started to react against the decision that they made. Meaning they did something they thought was going to produce life in them, build their career, save their reputation, but in the end it led to death. It was a delusion. And so they suffered disorders, anxiety disorders. A lot of times people register that in ways that if anything goes wrong in their life, they say, oh, God is punishing me for what I did earlier in my life. Another risk is depression. Great. 37% of men and women suffer increased levels of depression following an abortion. And of course, we try to medicate a lot of that anxiety and depression through alcohol and marijuana. Sometimes people try to go out and have another baby to replace the one that they've lost, as if you could actually replace a human being with another human being. And finally, as it starts to catch up with us, it leads to suicide ideation or even suicide itself. These are some of the things that happen to us when we treat human beings as animals and dispose of them as if they're just animals rather than eternal human beings. How should we then live? That's how Francis Schaeffer framed the question. How do we respond as Christians in a fallen and broken world? Let's take a break. When we come back, let's talk about how we can then live and respond to these realities.
The U.S. accounts for only 3% of the abortions that happen in our world each year, leaving 97% of the crisis before us as a world missions challenge. Would you join us in serving where the need is greatest? PassionLife, rescuing the most vulnerable where abortion is most concentrated.
We've received a really overwhelming and wonderful response to this tiny baby fetal model that we've developed here in PassionLife. This fetal model is a medically accurate representation from the 9th week after conception. If you go to our website, we've got a way for you to not only send those tiny babies around the world, but find out a way that you can have some of those tiny babies come to you for your own use as well.
This is why we start with churches and why we start with pastors and why we start with the Bible. We don't just come to Mexico and teach people to save babies. We teach people to obey the Word of God. This is what I want you to do. Pray, study the Bible, and let love tell you how to respond. Look for the women in your community and figure out how you can help them. This is my challenge to you, and it's not difficult. It will grow the faith of everyone in your church. You start bringing pregnant women in those doors, and everybody will want to help take care of them. And you will be obeying the call of God to rescue the innocent.
It was actually my generation that started to promote things like delaying or even abandoning the idea of marriage, of beginning to see that children are more of a bother than a blessing. I belong to what we call the baby boomer generation, and we have not left a great inheritance for the Gen Zers. They've come along and taken our delusions and put them on steroids, so to speak, now to the point where they start having dogs as children and strolling them around and treating them as they're the children, and taking the idea of abortion, which is treating human beings as if they're animals that can be disposed of the way you could a cat or a dog or a cow or a pig even. But that's the problem and the crisis of our times. It was Francis Schaeffer who, during the baby boomer generation, noticed these trends emerging and wrote a book called How Should We Then Live? It's a great challenge to us to constantly ask ourselves as Christians, how do we respond to these great moral crises, these delusions that are affecting so many people around us today? And so how should we live and respond to a time in which we treat dogs as if they're babies and babies as if they're dogs? And there are lots of things that we could say about that. I'm just going to point to you one of the places that I learned in my own life at a young age that I found to be life-changing. And that was Psalm 127. Back when I was in my 20s, we were all wrestling with what we wanted to do in our life, how we wanted to set our priorities, what kind of work and career did we have, and do we want to get married and have a family? So there's career and work and marriage and family on the other side, and constantly there are conversations how to keep these two together. And not follow the errors of earlier generations in which it was all work and no family, particularly for the role of men and fathers and husbands. It was Psalm 127 that was very helpful. I want to read it to you beginning in verse 2. It is vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for he gives to his beloved sleep. This was sort of the rebuke to the person who makes career their idol. If I just work harder, if I work longer, if I put in more hours, I can get up the corporate ladder and I can achieve self-fulfillment through my success. Today, if you can believe it or not, we actually have success showers in which people who've achieved a certain amount of success by setting aside things like marriage and children, they're now going to basically turn the bridal shower and the baby shower into what they call a success shower. So they've jettisoned these old things that promise fulfillment and created a new one, which is career success. I think, again, it's going to prove to be quite empty over a long period of time, and something that it just won't stand the test of time. We won't find fulfillment in career success in an ultimate sense. So here's a rebuke to the hardworking father or mother or person who simply wants to find their fulfillment in hard work, endless work, anxious toil, and lack of sleep. Then it goes on to put the other side. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a great reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks of his enemies in the gate. Again, if this is directed toward young men, it's a strong reminder to them that work isn't everything, and that probably family is a lot more important and fulfilling to us as men and as husbands and fathers, and our culture or our times are going to encourage. So if you want to be a radical countercultural person, Psalm 127 is a great way to keep things in balance between working but not making it an idol that will produce nothing in the end, and not ignoring your family and the most fundamental things that bring fulfillment, which is pouring yourself into the life of another person, your wife, your spouse, and pouring yourself into children and family. In the end, they seem to raise our stature in the whole community. We have greater influence than we have when we have a balanced life of work and family. Beyond that, I really want to encourage us as Christians today to be somewhat prophetic and countercultural, and not buy into in any way this idea that we should be treating animals as children, dogs as children, or babies as animals, but rather to be bold. And to me, that the best way to do that is to join with PassionLife as we work in China and India and Cuba and Nicaragua and Zambia and all over the world, trying to help the church live out this balanced life, doing the work that God's called us to do, to rescue the innocent and to challenge young men and women of the next generation to trust that the Lord knows what he's doing when he calls us to trust in him and walk in his ways. I think Passion Life is probably one of the greatest things that you could partner with in the world today. And I just want to encourage you, if you're not a part of a world missions program right now, if you're not praying for something, if you're not committed financially to do something along these lines, then really think about joining Passion Life in this way and visit our website and track what we do from travel to travel. We get a text update, become a modest monthly donor, $30, $50, $100 a month. Be invested in something that's hard and exciting. I think of the work that we're doing in Cuba right now, and we've got somebody on their way to Cuba even as I'm speaking to you. They're going to be meeting with doctors. They're taking 2 brand new ultrasound machines with us to Cuba. They're taking 3,000 fetal models packed in a couple of boxes to use to distribute among churches to get them into the hands of people across that island. We're trying to help everybody in Cuba become a rescuer to women and couples who are in an unplanned pregnancy, and to make sure to see this generation of the church make a life-saving difference in a whole country like Cuba, even as we're trying to do it here in the United States. You want to see something really exciting? Take a look at what God is doing in Cuba and how he's using Passion Life and people just like you and me to go down there, teach people what God says about human life, having intrinsic value, having equal value, having exceptional value, and having eternal value, which motivates us to reach out to mothers and couples who are thinking because of the difficult circumstances about abortion. And instead what we do is we show them that they can trust in God as their great provider, the one who provides daily bread. We bring the church along to help them as neighbors loving neighbors. And as a result of that, the babies are born, marriages are produced, men and women get an opportunity to get a vision for what it means to be a husband and wife and mother and father, and good things begin to happen in the whole community. I love to encourage you to join Passion Life as a monthly donor and a participant. To help you along with that, let me show you a video from our recent trip to Cuba, and it gives you a chance to hear from Mark, who led us in making this video.
We first started coming to Cuba in 2016, and that's because at that time, the data that we had said that Cuba had the highest abortion rate of any country in the world. So our goal was to see if we could spark these Christ-centered, church-driven, indigenously led pregnancy help movements across the island of Cuba. And that is exactly what happened. I'm telling you, the Cuban church responded in huge ways.
We were so excited because we started to walk through the community and see these women that we had heard about now rescued with their babies in their arms and with a beautiful smile on their face. And then we heard that they're actually coming to church with their babies, and the community all around them are actually seeing the transformation that's taken place here in Cuba.
Everywhere we go, we talk about what is happening in Cuba and in the Cuban church, because with very few resources, and I mean very few resources, they rose up and they figured out how to serve pregnant women and teach other Christians in their nearby communities how to do the exact same thing.
Estamos viviendo en Cuba un tiempo de avivamiento pro vida. Los pastores están recibiendo el mensaje, están siendo edificados con el mensaje de la vida, se están preparando para compartirlo a otros pastores, se han levantado coordinadores en toda la nación para enseñar a otros a compartir el mensaje de la vida, se han levantado centros de embarazo que atienden a la mujer en crisis, y todo esto lo estamos haciendo en muy poco tiempo.
If you had told us that we were going to see one pregnancy center open every year for the next 10 years, we'd have snapped that up in a heartbeat. But what has happened over these last couple of years is we've actually seen the Lord multiply it out, where there have been more than 10 open just in the last year or year and a half.
When we first came, we were number 1 in abortion per capita in the world. And today, we have dropped to number 4. So we are making an amazing improvement here in the island of Cuba.
So that is a breakthrough worth celebrating. Your partnership in the gospel doesn't just send us to Cuba, it sends us all over the world where we're able to challenge the darkest strongholds of abortion on our planet today. So because of you, Passion Life is able to crisscross the globe and offer that life-saving help in a life-changing way. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Passion Life's work in Cuba is ongoing. And like I mentioned, we just took 2 ultrasounds there. These ultrasound units cost us about $6,000 each. Be able to purchase them, get them ready, take them down to Cuba, make sure that the doctors know how to use them, give them some training. We've just recently bought 12 more of these that we're going to be taking to different parts of Africa. And we're producing these fetal models that we're using all over the world this year. I think we're going to try to produce another 25 to 50,000 of these little fetal models that allow people to talk to their neighbors as neighbors helping neighbors. I'm in trouble. I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to have an abortion. No, here's what your baby looks like. Let me help you find God's provision. These are the kinds of things that we want to equip literally hundreds of thousands of people all over the world to begin to look at babies with the value that they have, that they're not animals to be disposed of, and to begin to reject the trends of our time that tends to take animals and raise their value. Particularly, we were talking about how dogs are being treated as children in their little strollers. So let me encourage you, go to passionlife.org, sign up for the text updates there so that you can get the latest updates from Cuba. Later on, we'll be going to India. Mark is going to India. And you can get updates on how the gospel of life is penetrating India. There's a place for you to sign up as a modest monthly donor. And there are a whole bunch of resources there. And I would start with the 4 questions that help everybody know God's will from God's word for the times in which we live and how to respond to the realities of abortion today. How should we then live? Well, let's bring that question to the Bible, and with just 4 questions, you're going to be able to know just about everything that you need to know to be able to respond well to the moral crisis of abortion in the world today. The 4 questions, you can download it for free. Basically, it's a summary of several books I wrote, reduced down to 10 simple pages that you can use in a home group, a Sunday school class, or some other setting like that. So go and download those things. So sign up, stay in touch, study, contribute, and become a part of the great work of the gospel in our time today as we declare that dogs are not children, and children are not dogs. Thank you for being with us.